Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Carrie Erving, and today I'm going to be reading from my paper, Passing the Auto-Tune Torch, Gen Z's Adoption and Transformation of Digital Vocal Effects Processing. The use of digital effects processing and specifically real-time pitch correction, auto-tune, as a creative instrument is well documented in contemporary scholarship by Dunker 2024, Provenzano 2019 and 2018, Brovig and Danielson and 2016, among others. Building upon the concept of digital signatures, this paper examines the evolving aesthetic trends within popular vocal music over the last 7 years. Specifically, this paper investigates how Gen Z artists have adopted and transformed digital vocal effects processing practices inherited from previous generations. Several sub-questions emerge from this broader inquiry. First, how are younger musicians using vocal effects differently? Second, what role does the proliferation of bedroom studio production play? And third, what does the shift reveal about generational views on musical authenticity? So before examining generational changes in vocal aesthetics, it is necessary to define what constitutes digital vocal effects processing within the context of this study. Most centrally, this paper considers real-time pitch correction software, particularly Ontario's Auto-Tune, both as a corrective and creative tool. Beyond pitch correction, digital vocal processing also includes digitally produced layering and harmonization, whereby multiple vocal takes are stacked to produce dense timbral textures. Such practices, along with auto-tune, contribute to what Brovig and Danielson in 2016 identified as digital signatures, sonic markers that foreground the technological mediation embedded within recorded sound. And this study additionally includes broader processed vocal aesthetics, including deliberate uses of reverb, delay, and distortion. The normalization of digitally processed vocality among Gen Z artists cannot be understood without examining the historical trajectory through which vocal effects technologies evolved from concealed corrective mechanisms into audible stylistic conventions. While contemporary listeners often encounter heavily processed voices as ordinary features of popular music, the vocal aesthetics that define the present moment emerged through decades of technological experimentation, commercial adoption, and shifting assumptions regarding authenticity and musicianship. And I've included a slide with a brief summary of the recent historical context of the creative use of auto-tune. Three primary forms of evidence informed this research. When looking at the methodology, the first item is that this paper engages in case studies of selected millennial and Gen Z artists whose vocal production practices illustrate broader trends in digitally mediated vocality. These case studies are not intended as exhaustive representations of generational musical production. Rather, they function as representative examples demonstrating different relationships between digital vocal effects and artistic identity. Second, this paper incorporates autoethnographic observations gathered through recent experiences teaching undergraduate songwriting students in a university setting. These observations reveal recurring patterns in how Gen Z musicians discussed, implemented, and conceptualized vocal effects processing within their creative work. These observations emerged organically through classroom discussions, songwriting projects, production critiques, and informal conversations regarding aesthetic decision-making. Third, this study incorporates observations drawn from one-on-one voice instruction with both millennial and Gen Z singers. These lessons offered particularly valuable perspectives regarding tensions between digitally mediated vocal production and embodied vocal development. Many students entered lessons after substantial experience recording with pitch correction technologies, creating opportunities to observe how perceptions of the raw voice interacted with technologically mediated expectations. Autoethnographic methodology is particularly useful here because it permits close observation of rapidly changing creative practices often underrepresented within formal scholarship. As popular music production becomes increasingly decentralized through home recording environments and bedroom studio culture, everyday creative behaviors may emerge more quickly than scholarly frameworks capable of analyzing them. While classroom and lesson-based observations cannot claim universal representativeness, they provide important insight into the attitudes and practices shaping contemporary vocal aesthetics among emerging musicians. Importantly, this study does not position technological mediation and traditional musicianship as mutually exclusive categories. Rather, it approaches digital vocal processing as embedded within broader ecosystems of creative labor, technological literacy, and artistic identity formation. So I'm going to briefly focus on the case studies and just share the examples of contemporary practice, just in a summary setting here in this presentation. So the research looks at the work of Charlie XCX and her deliberate vocal digitality and hyperpop aesthetics. In the work of James Blake, it was observed that there is selective processing of vocals, selective use of autotune as emotional texture. And with Bon Iver, there is an alternation between processed and unprocessed vocals and a use of digital flourishes, especially in vocal ad-libs. In looking at contemporary Gen Z artists, there were 3 examples of contemporary practice, starting with Lil Uzi Vert, who's on the cusp of millennial and Gen Z generations and uses a signature heavy level of autotune, such as in the recent song, What You Saying. Billie Eilish occasionally uses specific autotune flourishes or passages, you could say, that suit the song, such as in her song NDA. And Baby Keem occasionally uses autotune more heavily on more melodic passages and sung sections, such as in his song Good Flirts. So to get to the key findings from this research, and particularly from the study of the autoethnographic data from songwriting classrooms and from private vocal instruction. The first key finding was that there is a bedroom producer versus performer collapse. So similar to their millennial predecessors, Gen Z artists often simultaneously write, record, and produce their own music. I found this to be true in the work of students in both my songwriting classes and voice lessons. And the implications are that technical literacy and home studios are normalized. There are hybrid identities of producer and artist. And many of these bedroom artists don't have vocal training, which is part of their aesthetic. But for many, it has led autotune to be the default vocal sound. And several expressed wanting to explore vocal training to strengthen their vocal capabilities and push beyond a reliance on autotune. Key finding number 2 is that there is a continued usage of autotune as a creative and corrective tool for Gen Z artists, with caveats. So Gen Z artists naturally treat vocal processing as an expressive tool, while still also using it at times for corrective purposes, but some describe wishing that they were less reliant on it. As an example, there are intentional stylizations. Students reported that autotune helped match the style that they were going for. There's genre signaling use through the use of autotune, especially for rappers, in terms of some shared that it's how they write and or how they sound. It's used for its emotional texture, so students choose whether or not to use it based on the emotion of the song or certain parts of the song. And some expressed a desire not to overly rely on autotune, worried that it was too boring, predictable, or limiting creatively. The third key finding was that vocal training provides expanded possibilities. Millennial and Gen Z artists, especially melodic rappers, are seeking out voice training to expand their vocal skills. So both in the university and in the private lesson space, I found this to be true. Students who typically use autotune in their production explored a more vulnerable space in developing their raw vocals by working to find their correct range, working on breath support, intonation, and balance between vocal registers through warm-ups. Challenges were also encountered, particularly the fact that technique building takes time, and it's challenging for new singers to hear their own unedited vocals when they are used to a different sound already. And learning how to sing expressively is its own challenge, what with learning how to use your voice to create dynamics, phrasing, and adequate breath support and intonation. And the final finding was that there's a shift in how authenticity may be defined by Gen Z. So The traditional view would be that vocal processing is artificial. And as we've seen in this presentation, the millennial and Gen Z view for many artists is that authenticity shifts from purely belonging to those that use their natural voice, and it shifts towards an intentional artistic identity that interacts with technology. So processing becomes a visibly authentic form of self-expression, and the incorporation of old-fashioned skill building, such as vocal technique study and the study of songwriting, is viewed as beneficial and adding to mastery of craft, along with expanding creative possibilities and deeper authenticity. The broader implications for this research are that there are changing definitions of musicianship and authenticity. New pedagogies of music production and vocal performance are needed in order to meet the demands and changing needs of musicians. And digital mediation is further embedded into the next generation's creative identity. And so this raises the question, how should music scholarship rethink authenticity in order to incorporate the practices of digital native Gen Z artists? In conclusion, the 3 takeaways are that vocal processing has become normalized. The second is that millennial and Gen Z artists transformed it from correction-based applications to utilizing it for both corrective and expressive purposes. But some Gen Z artists are still interested in shifting away from being overly reliant on an auto-tuned sound. And the third is that vocal effects processing can be combined with more traditional vocal training to provide artists with a broader selection of artistic choices. Thank you.